I've been working for many weeks now on producing a video, The Heavens Declare the Birth of Jesus Christ. And doing this has required me to learn a lot of different software programs that I had not used before. And it's required a lot of being willing to sort of not only learn things, but push through not only that learning curve, but all the many, many times when things just don't seem to do what they're supposed to do. When they don't work the way that it's supposed to work. And it's reminded me of how much believing requires persistence. The law of believing, so much of it just gets down to refusing to take no as an answer. Mm-hmm. And I've learned over the years, but something that I've seen for, pretty much my whole life in ministering God's Word, that once I know something is available, once I know that this is something that can be done, because you do have to know, first of all, what is available. But once I believe that something is available, then I just refuse to accept defeat. I refuse to accept when someone or something tells me that, no, you can't do this. And it just takes that determination, that persistence, that act of the will to push through situations to get, many times, what God's answer is. This evening, we're going to look at some examples in the Gospels of people that were persistent. And because they were persistent in what they wanted, they received what they were believing for. We'll start off in Matthew chapter 15. Matthew 15 and verse 21. Then Jesus went thence and departed into the coast of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a woman of Canaan came out of the same coast and cried unto him, saying, Have mercy on me, O Lord, thou son of David. My daughter is grievously vexed with the devil. Now, this is a woman of Canaan. This is not a woman of Judea. This is not one of God's people. And that's why Jesus answers in verse 24, But he answered and said, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He said, sorry, can't do anything for you. Because Jesus Christ's ministry was very specific. He was sent to minister to the house of Israel. He begins his ministry reading from the scroll of Isaiah, where it's words that are very directly to Israel, describing how he was there to heal the brokenhearted, the lame, and so on and so forth. But this woman and her daughter were not part of that group. It's why the day of Pentecost and what we received on that day is so incredible. Because until that day, we wouldn't have been in that group, not the ones that I'm looking at right here. We were not part of Israel. We were not part of that group, and we were strangers from the promises, strangers from the covenant of Israel and the promises. And that's the predicament that this woman is in. Then she, verse 25, then came she and worshipped him, saying, Lord, help me. She just doesn't take no for an answer. She just refuses to accept what he's saying. But he answered and said, this time he's going to say it a bit stronger, kind of sounds to our ears, maybe even a little harsh. I don't think that that's what the feeling of it was. But he said, it is not meet, it's not right to take the children's bread and to cast it to the dogs. You know, that's a pretty hard thing to say. It's not right for me to take the children's bread and cast to the dogs. You know, now I'm a softie. I can't ever have anything without casting something to my dogs. But on the other hand, you know, I'm not hurting for doing that. But Israel, they were the ones that had the need. And he said, it's not right for me to just take theirs and give it to somebody else. But look what she says, verse 27. And she said, truth, Lord. She didn't fight with them. She didn't say, you know, that's not right. She said, truth, Lord, yet the dogs eat of the crumbs which fall from their master's table. She's saying, you know, I understand that, Lord. And all I'm looking for is what for you is just some crumbs. Just some crumbs. You know? Just this one little thing for you and for me and my daughter so much. Verse 28. Then Jesus answered and said unto her, O woman, great is thy faith, great is thy believing. Be it unto thee, even as thou what? Wilt. Even as thou wilt. And her daughter was made whole from that very hour. That woman refused to take no for an answer. That woman had a very strong will. And she persisted, and because she did, she got what she was looking for. Look at Mark chapter 2. She wasn't the only one that was persistent. Mark 2, verse 1. And again, he, Jesus Christ, entered into Capernaum after some days. And it was noised that he was in the house. So he comes to this house, this person's house where, you know, must have been a big house, but they were having a meeting. And everybody heard about it, and everybody was coming to the place because by this time Jesus Christ had quite a reputation for the words that he spoke and for the miracles, the works that he did. Verse 2. And straightway many were gathered together, insomuch that there was no room to receive them, no, not so much as about the door. And he preached the word unto them. It was such a crowded room that you couldn't get in. You couldn't get in. You know, some of the fellowships that I have attended in my life were like that, where it was wall to wall, people sitting on the floor, and there was no room to get in. Not one I was at, but someone I knew talked about having gone to their first fellowship, and the house was so packed that the windows were open, and people had ladders up against the house, and were like sticking their head in the window to hear the word. That's some hunger, isn't it?
Wow. Yeah.
Well, that's the kind of fellowship that was going on here. It was so packed, you could not literally get in the place. Verse 3. And they come unto him, bringing one sick of the palsy. Palsy means that they were paralyzed, and most more modern translations have some version of that, which was born of 4. So this man who was paralyzed was born of 4. And that means he had 4 different parents, born, being carried, and that's, you know, that kind of born of 4. And when they could not come nigh unto him for the press, they uncovered the roof where he was. And when they had broken it up, they let down the bed wherein the sick of the palsy lay. These guys couldn't get, they have this friend, this person that they care about, that he has this great need for healing. And they can't get in the place, so they said, sorry, pal, we're just going to have to go home. Too bad it didn't work out for you, right?
No.
No, that's not what they did. they refused to quit.
Wow.
They would not quit. They would not quit. Believing means never quitting. To believe means you just never quit. These people refused to quit. They were going to do whatever it took to get their friend to the master so that he could be healed. So what did they do? They uncovered the roof. They took apart the roof. Now, before you start feeling like sad for the homeowner and like, oh my gosh, this poor guy. Great that the other guy got healed, but I wouldn't want somebody to take my roof apart. You got to call somebody in. You get thousands of dollars. But roofs there were a little different than one you probably have on your house. I'd like to read to you from Strange Scriptures That Perplex the Western Mind that explains the Eastern custom and a little bit about what's going on here. Scripture tells that there was such a large crowd that the 4 men who carried the sick man could not force their way through, so they did just what a native would do, went up the outside stairs to the roof, broke up part of the roof, and lowered the sick man down in front of Christ. Oh, the homes are not like ours, but very low with flat roofs. Jesus was probably standing in the open liwan, a sort of vestibule in front of the house, with the roof over it, but no door. Those who carried the sick man, not being able to come at him for the press, went to the roof and removed as much of that as was necessary and let the sick man down at Jesus' feet. It would be an easy matter to do that in this kind of house. The roof is not high, and by stooping after they had removed a piece of the roof and holding the corners of the better couch, which was merely a thick padded quilt, such as people still use in that region, letting the palsied man down would be rather a simple affair. The peasants are accustomed to opening their roofs to let down grain, straw, and other articles. We have often seen it done. The materials used for the roofs are beams about 3 feet or more apart, across which are arranged short sticks quite close together, and then covered with thickly matted thorn bush called bellin. Over this is spread a coat of mortar, which is covered with earth and rolled flat and smooth. Any part of this could be removed without harming the rest, and no objection whatsoever would be made by the owners of the house. All men did was to scrape back a part of the earth over the liwan where Christ stood, remove the thorns and the short sticks, and let down the man on the quilt at the feet of Jesus. Afterward, they would repair the roof, restore it as before. Not all roofs are made like this, but of material more easily removed. The roof may have been made out of coarse matting, or it may have been of boards or stone slabs that could have very easily been lifted for the time being. Anyway, the roofs are very low and flat and easily reached by stairs from the yard or court and are easily opened. You or I could do it with little difficulty open a roof as these 4 men did. You may be easier than me, but you see what happened there. But it still took some real persistence, didn't it?
Yeah.
It still took some real persistence. You know, it sort of reminds me of back when I was in Connecticut, and I was responsible for the setup of many meetings that we did in different kinds of hotels or other places. And once we were doing a meeting in actually a high school auditorium that we had rented, and the president of the ministry at that time, the president of the ministry we were involved in, was going to be at this meeting. So you wanted everything to be right? You want everything to be right anyway, but certainly in a situation like this. And the auditorium had a large stage, and there was supposed to be a couple of prominent spotlights that shone down from the ceiling of this auditorium onto that stage. And both of them had burnt out bulbs. So he essentially would have been teaching in the dark. He would have been in the dark. People would have been in the light, but nobody would have been able to see him. And there was someone, a custodian, that was supposed to be there to help us, but he was less than any help. He had neither the interest or the ability, I suppose, to do anything. But I knew that this had to be available or he wouldn't be there in the first place. And so I just walked around the whole school until I found a 20-foot ladder and had a couple of guys bring it in, and I climbed up the ladder and found also some bulbs and replaced the bulbs. That's simple. Kind of like taking off the tiles of the roof. But it is a matter of being persistent, of being convinced that there has to be some way to do this, and then you just push through. That's believing. That's believing. Believing isn't just this sort of, all so spiritual endeavor. Yes, it's spiritual, but a lot of it is just a matter of persistence. It's why it's available for saint or sinner alike. It's just not stopping until you get what you want. Look at Luke chapter 18. This one you may be familiar with. Verse 1. And he spake a parable unto them to this end, that men ought always to pray and not to faint, not to quit, not to give up. Men, when they pray, should keep praying until they get what they want, and to not stop, not quit, not accept defeat. And he taught this parable, verse 2, saying, There was in a city a judge, which feared not God, neither regarded man. Quite a fellow, huh? And there was a widow in that city, and she came unto him, saying, Avenge me of mine adversary. I want some justice. I want you to do some justice here. I've got somebody that's done me wrong. Verse 4. And he would not for a while, but afterward he said within himself, Though I fear not God, nor regard man, yet because this widow troubleth me, because she just won't leave me alone, because she just keeps pestering me about this, and just keeps at it, I will avenge her, lest by her continual coming she weary me. I don't care about justice. I don't care about this woman. I don't even care about God. But she's just a pest, and she's just nagging me to death. And so to get her off my back, I'm going to do this. And the Lord said, Hear what the unjust judge saith. Jesus Christ teaches this parable to illustrate that when you pray, you shouldn't quit. You shouldn't give up. Kind of a funny one to teach. Verse 7. And shall not God avenge his own elect, which cry day and night unto him, though he bear long with them? I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man cometh, shall he find faith or believing on the earth. He's making a comparison here that if the most unjust judge there is would grant the request because someone is persistent, then certainly our loving Father, our God who cares about us, will grant what we request if we just don't faint, if we just don't quit. Look at John chapter 5. It's so important to just be persistent. That last one about prayer reminds me of I can't quote it, but the great George Mueller, and I won't take the time to explain him, but one of the greatest believers of history, of modern history. And he said something to the effect of that the great problem, the great fault in Christians is that they just don't keep praying. That when they're praying for something, they just don't stay with it. And it's not, you balance that against the other one, where the other record where it says people think that when you pray, don't keep praying the same thing over and over again because people think that they're going to be answered for their much asking. Well, so how do you put those together, right? On the one hand, Don't keep saying it. It's not that we say the same prayer over and over again. It's not that by our action of just doing it over again. It's that you keep believing until you get the result. You keep pursuing, you keep believing, you keep in your mind that you're not going to quit. You have a need, don't give up on it. Don't give up on it. So many times people resign themselves to less than the best in life. So many times people settle. They just stop short of getting what they really desire, what they really need, because they faint. They just faint. Verse 1, chapter 5. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is at Jerusalem by the sheep market a pool, which is called in the Hebrew tongue Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of impotent folk, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. Now this is the next verse. If you don't know what I'm going to tell you, you've stumbled over this many times and thought, what on earth is this talking about? And if you don't have a King James Version, but rather you read it in another version of the Bible, it's one of the funniest things I've seen in most versions of modern Bibles, like the NIV or ESV. There's no verse there. There's a number, but there's no verse. They not only took it out, they just left the verse number so that you can still follow that, but they took out the verse. Why? Because it should have never been in there. It wasn't part of the original text. If I had the time, and I've talked too much about too many other things here, but I'd explain it to you. I'd recommend in this wonderful book. I wrote this book, The Bible Through the Ages, and in it I explain how errors like this crept in. And, to give you the short version, scribes, when they were copying, sometimes would write an explanatory note in the margin, kind of like some of your Bibles might have, if you've got a study Bible or something like that. And then, but also, scribes would write in the margin words that, I missed something. I'll put that in the margin. The next fellow will know he should put that back in the text. And it would be easy, wouldn't it, to confuse, was that there because he forgot to put something in and he put it in the margin? Or is it an explanatory note? Well, that's how that verse got in there. At any rate, you can just throw out all of verse 4 about this angel and troubling the water and so on and so forth. We'll skip over it. Verse 5. And a certain man was there which had an infirmity 38 years. 38 years. That is a long time to have whatever kind of illness he had. 38 years. When Jesus saw him laying there, and knew that he'd now been a long time in that case, because he went and investigated the family, and God had showed him that, right? Mm-hmm. He said unto him, wilt thou be made whole? Wilt thou be made whole? Do you still have enough will to get healed? How important that was. You're here, you've had this forever. You're here because you want to be healed. You obviously have some believing or you wouldn't be here, but do you still will to be made whole? And the fellow goes on to kind of say, well, here's my problem. I can't get to the water. There's supposed to be healing water. Nobody will carry me. And verse 8, Jesus said unto him, rise, take up thy bed and walk. Verse 9. And immediately the man was made whole and took up his bed and walked. And on the same day was the Sabbath. Oh, well, that means trouble. But Jesus Christ asked him that very important question, do you still have the will to be made whole? Boy, it's the case in so many records that we see in the Gospels. I won't take the time, but another one that I had in my notes here is the record of the woman who had the issue of blood. And, you know, I don't remember if it says how long she had this, but I know it says that she had 12 years that she had this condition and had been to many doctors and was not any better, but just made worse. You know, sadly, that's the experience of many people when it comes to the medical care that they receive. Not that I'm putting down medical care or doctors by any means, but this woman, it didn't do it. It didn't do it. Well, what do you do when that's the case? What do you do? You know, if you go to God first, and if you pray and you go to God first, and you don't get the results right away, and so then you go to someone else and you have them minister to you or pray for you, and let's say you still don't get it, and then you go to a doctor and you still don't get it, then I guess you're just done and you just call Digger Odell, right? No. No.
Stay persistent.
You know, you stay persistent. You know, go back and repeat one. Go back to the beginning. Go back to the beginning. Don't give up. Don't quit. Keep praying. Keep believing. And if you do, if you keep believing, then you do get the result. I'd like to close with one of my favorite poems by probably my favorite poet. The poet's Edgar A. Guest, and the poem is called Don't Quit. When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high and you want to smile, but you have to sigh, when care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but don't you quit. Mm-hmm. Life is strange with its twists and turns, as every one of us sometimes learns, and many a fellow turns about when he might have won had he stuck it out. Don't give up, though the pace seems slow. You may succeed with another blow. Often the goal is nearer than it seems to a faint and faltering man. Often the struggler has given up when he might have captured the victor's cup. And he learned too late when the night came down how close he was to the golden crown. Success is failure turned inside out, the silver tint of the clouds of doubt. And when you never can tell how close you are, it may be near when it seems far. So stick to the fight when you're hardest hit. It's when things seem worse that you must not quit. God bless you.